Chapter 16 is the last chapter of Mark's Gospel. There's one central event that happens in it. 3 women go up to the tomb of Jesus to anoint his body with spices, and as they go up, they said to themselves, "Who will roll away the boulder for us at the opening of the tomb?" For it was a very large boulder. When they arrive, they find the tomb empty, and someone tells them that Jesus of Nazareth is not there. He has been raised from the dead, and then they run away in fear because they were afraid. So that gives me a pretty good visual subject to draw on, an empty tomb. Specifically, a cave tomb cut out of the rock with a boulder rolled in front of it to seal it off. So basically, it's a painting of a cave with a rock in front of it. Here's how I did that in 2014. As you can see, it's a rather basic picture of a cave with a boulder in front of it. Then over the top, I have overlaid a quote from the chapter in the shape of the letter W. For the 2021 version, I did a design that was very similar, but because I used a different translation in 2021 than I did 7 years ago, the first letter of the chapter was also different. Instead of W, the first letter of when, it was A, the first letter of and. What you're seeing here is several swatches of Sumi ink that I have let dry for a couple days. I'm working on watercolor paper because I'm going to be working with a lot of watercolor paints. Sumi is a water-based ink, so it will mix with water-based paints. I'm very happy with this process, which I learned this year from a YouTube channel called Shibasaki Watercolor. Using white gouache or water-based paint, I'm going to paint the shape of the cave mouth over the Sumi ink so that there's the cave entrance. Then, for the very edge of the cave entrance, I'm going to agitate the Sumi ink so that it mixes with the white water-based paint on top of it and gives us that very nice gray. Then, at the edges of the gray, as you can see, it's going to mix all by itself with the white paint to create these very cool patterns, which I can then make even cooler by doing this. This was extremely fun, probably the most fun process of any of the initials. The swirly patterns won't be quite as nice when they dry, but they will dry into a very nice sort of uneven and natural looking pattern that looks a lot like rock and shadow. I'll just mix a little bit more into the cave entrance to make it a bit nicer, and then after I'm satisfied with the mixing on the cave entrance, I'm going to create some cracks in the rock to build out the details on the more well-lit parts of the cave. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take a ukulele pick. Normally, I would use a palette knife, but I don't have a palette knife. So I'm going to use a ukulele pick and scratch at the gray parts of the paint so that it then flows into the still wet white paint. As it flows, it will mix at the edges and create its own swirly patches, which, again, will dry very appealingly and unevenly to look like rock in shadow. Now you can see that the white paint looks pretty starkly white when it's still wet. However, as it dries, it will mix with the underlying black Sumi ink and become darker. Even better, it will mix unevenly, so it will create a very natural looking rock. It'll look like uneven shadows on a gray rock. You can see along the bottom there that I made a lot of versions of the cave entrance. For many chapters, I did make multiple versions because I wasn't satisfied with what I'd done. On this chapter, however, I was satisfied, but the process was just so much fun that I kept going. This is the cave that I eventually decided to use. Unfortunately, I didn't film it at quite as good an angle. Again, I paint the cave shape with a white water-based paint. I then agitate the edge of the cave to create some gray, and then I scratch it with the ukulele pick to create the crags in the rock. You can see it mixing with itself as I do that. Then, being satisfied with my cave, I will write the initial letter A. You can see in the light gray portions how they've dried unevenly and created a very rock-like texture, which I didn't actually have to work for, it just did that by itself. The shape of the A fits very nicely in the cave mouth. Better, I think, than the 2014 shape of the W. I think it also reads as an A, so hopefully it doesn't impact legibility. Here is the 2021 version in situ. And because I like this initial so much, I'm going to zoom in and show you just how great it looks close up. Again, I didn't do most of this shading on purpose, it just did this by itself. This was definitely the most fun I had, making any of the initials.